Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. As you can clearly see, today we're talking about Candyman and Hellraiser. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like Macho Man Randy Savage there. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. What? What? No, we're talking about Friday the 13th today, obviously. Now, I'm not going to do the video in the mask because that would be really hot and annoying. This is a real machete, by the way. So real, in fact, that I cut myself the other day on it. I don't know if you guys can see that little cut there. Yeah, I know. I like.
Poor thing, Dave. Poor thing.
But it hurt. Yeah, this is not to be messed around with. I'm just gonna put that fucking thing over there. Isn't this a great sweatshirt, or a hoodie? I should say sweatshirt. What is this? 1986? Isn't this a great hoodie? I purchased it from the website horrormerch.com. Now, they don't know me. I don't know them. It's not like I have any sort of affiliation with them. I just really like their shit, so I thought I would give them a shout out. But the quality's fantastic. It's thick, it's warm, perfect for the winter months if you live in a climate where it gets pretty chilly this time of year. It's great. Unbelievably great. I would not hesitate to purchase from them again. So horrormerch.com. Check them out if you haven't. Tons of great shit. So today we're talking about Friday the 13th, but specifically what I want to see and what I think they should do with a potential remake of Friday the 13th. Now, about 4 months ago, I uploaded a video entitled Let's Talk Friday the 13th, where I basically talked about my favorite Friday the 13th, which is the original, by the way. I also like part 2, and I like part 3, and I do like part 4, not nearly as much as the original, and there's reasons for that. I have an appreciation for part 6, Jason Lives, but that's sort of where it ends for me. When I think of Jason, I tend to think of Ted White's portrayal of Jason from Friday the 13th Part 4, The Final Chapter, and Richard Brooker's portrayal of Jason from Friday the 13th Part 3. I also think of, Jason from Friday the 13th Part 2. I think the potato sack, one-eye Jason certainly has its place. But when I think of the hockey mask Jason, those are the two portrayals of Jason that I tend to think of. I don't think of Kane Hodder's Jason. I mean, Kane Hodder didn't become Jason until 1988, towards the end of the decade. His first appearance was Friday the 13th Part 7, The New Blood. So, for me, by that time, by 1988, I was 9 years old. I was still into Friday the 13th, but I wasn't really into the hulking sort of Godzilla kind of Jason, the indestructible kind of Jason. I sort of liked the, there was a sense of vulnerability with the portrayals of Jason in part 3 and 4, even though he was, hulking in his own right, and he was sort of this twisted, weird kind of monster. There was always this, for me anyway, there was always this sense of, hey, you know what? I think we can kind of beat this guy. I think it's possible. And I kind of like that. Whereas by the time you get to 8 and 9 and 10, it's just kind of like all bets are off and he's fucking indestructible. And I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I totally respect those of you who are. I think it's great. But that aside, in that video, I also briefly talked about, what I wanted to see from a potential remake, but I thought the subject matter was so important enough that I wanted to dedicate an entire video to it. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, what I do think you need to do, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, especially if you know my views on Halloween and you know my views on A Nightmare on Elm Street, I do believe that they need to go back to the roots. They need to go, look, one of the reasons why I wrote some things down here to keep myself on track and make sure I don't forget anything. So let me, yeah, okay. I think I'm here. Yeah. Okay. It helps. It helps. It helps. One of the reasons why I love the original Friday the 13th so much, and I mentioned this in that video that I uploaded 4 months ago, but it bears repeating because it's so important. One of the reasons why I love the original so much is because there's this slight psychological component to it. Now, Friday the 13th, at its core, was, is, and always will be, and should be, a bona fide horror slasher movie. It is. Unlike Halloween, okay, Friday the 13th is your blood, guts, and gore, right? You know, we go to the theater, we watch the movies to see, you know, the kills, and yeah, this is all this kind of shit. But in that original Friday the 13th, there was this slight sort of psychological component to it. And what I mean by that is, we don't know who the killer is until like the last, okay, spoiler alert in case you haven't seen the fucking movie, but I think it's safe to say everybody who's watching this has seen it. Maybe not in a long time, but I'm sure you have. We don't even know who the killer is until the last like 15, 20 minutes of the movie when you find out that it's Pamela Voorhees, Jason's mom, who's like this 60-year-old woman running around the fucking forest at night in the middle of a fucking storm, you know, doing things like, help me, mommy, help me. I mean, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that in and of itself is like fucked up. And there's so much potential there to nurture that even more. Bring it into the 21st century. Not hokey, not campy, not dumb, not lame. I mean, take that and go, we got something here that we can sort of nurture a little bit, bring it into the 21st century, modernize it a little bit, but make it really fucked up as a starting point. Okay? As a starting point. Because there's some great scenes in that movie too, that I also talked about 4 months ago as well. Like that scene where there's that woman in the bathroom and she looks to her left and there's that, the cinematography is great. It really is. I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves. It's a really creepy, eerie, very moody, very atmospheric film. There's that scene where the girl's in the bathroom and she looks to her left. And, you know, there's that POV shot down the corridor towards the stalls, and there's the curtain there, and, you know, and you see that hand kind of come around the curtain, and then it goes away, and the curtains move a bit, and she's like, hello? Like, who's there kind of thing? You know what I mean? That's some great fucking shit, you know? And when it's raining and it's dark, you only see where the flashlights are pointed, so it's not like in modern horror, in modern films, and there's reasons for this, of course. When you're shooting at night, it's really well lit, okay? And you can tell it's at night, and sometimes they try to justify the light source to be maybe from a street lamp or from the moon, you know, or whatever the case is. But in Friday the 13th, when it's at night, yes, they do have some lights, and you can actually tell there's a few scenes where it's like, oh, that's an external light coming out of the middle of fucking nowhere. But by and large, when they're like running from, you know, site to site, from cabin to cabin in the rain, it's fucking dark. And you just see like this light, you know, beam from the flashlight going up and down, right? You know, and you hear like, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, it really gives this sense of this claustrophobic sort of feel and vibe, like we really are in the middle of fucking nowhere, miles away from civilization, you know, and I really love that. We need to go back to the roots of that, create that claustrophobic, dark mood and atmospheric vibe that the original set so well. Now, this is where, that's one. Number two, this is where I'm probably going to lose a lot of you guys, but whatever. This is what I think they need to do to give them the best probability of success. But I do understand that this would be a risk and that the probability of them actually doing what I'm about to say is actually highly unlikely. I'm just giving you my thoughts, what I would really love to see, and, you know, I think it would be kind of awesome. I think that they should make Pamela Voorhees the main killer again in a Friday the 13th remake. Now, are they going to do that? Probably not. And the reasons are, of course, as we know, this is so identified with the Friday the 13th brand. Jason is so identified now and so iconic that having a Friday the 13th movie without this is a huge, huge risk. And I get it. I totally understand it. But if it were up to me, I would be like, you know what? Let's think about this, because I think you have such an advantage to create a really, still keep that slasher, gore, blood guts, you know, and shit there that, you know, fans of the franchise love. But now you add this psychological component with this 60-year-old woman, you know, and I would love it if the film sort of began, bring it into the 21st century where the vast majority of the movie takes place in 2018, let's say. but it opens like how the original opened in what, 1957, 58, 56, somewhere around there. This new incarnation, this remake, would open in like 1985, right? So it's like 30 years ago, same as it was like 30, 25 years ago from where the original was. And you open it, I think it would be cool if you opened it where it's like it's a black screen, right? And you kind of hear like 2414 2414 1721 2471, you know, like police banter, right, on the radio. And you hear coming through the radio that there's been a murder at Camp Crystal Lake. And it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, right? And a couple of the local sheriffs, small town, you know, America, rural America, Midwest, small town, mid-80s, right? You know, you got these 2 cops maybe in 2 cop cars, 80s cop cars, right? Go out to Camp Crystal Lake to investigate. And when they get there, all they hear is like screaming. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And they hear fucking screaming. Okay. And then all of a sudden, this, you know, young sort of like, you know, 18, 19-year-old female counselor comes running out of one of the cabins, and she runs up to the cops and she's like, "You've got to help me. You've got to help me." And there's blood on her face, and maybe her arm is gashed up a little bit, and she's screaming, and the cops are trying to calm her down, right? And the scene is full of this thick tension, like really thick tension, like shit just got real really quickly. And the cops trying to calm her down, say, man, please calm down. You know, what's happened? Where are the others? Where are the other counselors? You know, where are the children? You know, and she's like, "They're dead. They're all dead." Like she's just losing her mind. Okay. Now you as an audience member are thinking, are you kidding me? All of the counselors and all of the children are dead? No fucking way. Okay. And of course, as you would come to see in a few moments, that's not totally the case, but she's in hysterics. So she doesn't even know what the hell is going on. Like she doesn't even know what she's saying. She's so messed up. But what's really great about this moment is that it's very moody, very atmospheric. You only see their faces in the illumination of their flashlight beams. And there's this one moment where we catch a glimpse of the woman's t-shirt, and her t-shirt, you know, is kind of drenched in blood, you know, a little bit, not fully, but there's, you know, quite a bit of blood on her sleeve and her shoulder. But on the front of her shirt, it actually says Camp Crystal Lake. And on the back of it, it says counselor. So it's clear that this is one of the counselors. One of the deputies tries to calm her down, okay? And the other deputy, you know, takes out his gun, goes into one of the cabins by himself. And it's really this tense moment, right? You know, maybe like handheld camera, right? So there's this uneasiness. Don't use the Steadicam, right? You know, handhold that fucking thing, okay? So there's like this uneasiness with the framing, right? And we go into the cabin with one of the deputies, you know, and he's looking around, and yeah, there are like a few dead bodies there. There's blood on the wall, and it's like, holy shit, like what the hell, right? And he runs back out to the car to the other deputy and is like, you know, call for backup, call an ambulance right now. But then what happens is the cop starts to hear, you know, movement coming from the forest and the woods, you know, surrounding them, right? You know, and the cop's like, "Who's there? Come on out, arms up, show me your hands, show me your fucking hands." But then what the cop notices is that the faces of children, like, you know, 10, 9, 12, 11 years of age, begin to pop out from behind trees and from behind rocks. And, you know, their faces are illuminated in his flashlight beam. And then it becomes very clear that, oh my God, the children have survived. They ran into the woods. And now that they see that the police are there, you know, they're starting to come out. And the cop's like, oh shit. And he gets back on his radio and he's like, you know, where the fuck is my backup? You know, I've got kids out here, you know, I've got murdered bodies and all that kind of shit. And now, you know, there's a bit of a passage of time, and now say it's like 20 minutes later, and there's an ambulance there, maybe 2 ambulances there. There's other cop cars there. Now there's like, you know, 10, you know, law enforcement officials there, and they're all talking with each other. And then maybe that cop, the one that, you know, was shining his flashlight into the woods, you know, saying, you know, get your hands up, right? Maybe he then gets into the back of the patrol car and he starts talking to that young camp counselor who had come out, you know, screaming bloody murder, right? At the beginning of the movie, you know, now that she's calmed down and there's more law enforcement there now, right? And she feels a sense of security and she feels safe, you know, he gets into the back of the car to try and see if he can have a little bit of a conversation with her, to try and see if he can get any sort of information out of her about what the fuck just happened here, right? Now, we as an audience member are put in the same position as the police officers. So they're not quite sure what's going on. We don't know what's going on. So we're on this very suspenseful kind of discovery journey together in the opening 5-10 minutes of the movie, right? Really exciting, really suspenseful. It's like we're one of the police officers. I love that fucking shit, okay? And we're just as eager to find out from this camp counselor, this 19-year-old girl, what the fuck just happened, right? It's like, holy shit. Like, the opening's fucking intense. So he's in the back of the car and, you know, he says to her, you know, ma'am, you know, anything you can tell us. What happened here? You know, what happened? And maybe it's a profile shot, right? Of her head. And her head's down like this. And you can see the tears. You can see the blood on her face. Maybe she's got like a bandage on her shoulder now because it's been, you know, 30 minutes or so, right? And maybe the paramedics have sort of, you know, attended to her in between that time. And she looks up at him like this, as if she's going to say something. And it cuts to black. And then you see I don't know about you guys, but I'm fucking hooked, okay? Like, that is, for me, I'd be like, oh shit, okay, I want to know what's going to happen now. And then, of course, you jump 30-something years, 32, 33 years into the future, into present day. And Camp Crystal Lake has been closed down. It's been shut down for years. But now they're in the process of getting it up and running again. They feel that, you know what, enough time has passed. We've buried those demons. We want to make something positive out of this campsite, and we feel that now that it's been over 30 years, we can do that. However, something to keep in mind is that even though it's been over 30 years since that, you know, horrible massacre at Camp Crystal Lake back in 1985, to this day, the killer has not been caught. Nobody knows who the killer is. Now, obviously, you and I know that it's probably going to be Pamela Voorhees because, well, this is, after all, a remake of Friday the 13th. But in the context of the narrative, nobody knows. To this day, they're still on the loose. But enough time has gone by, over 30 years has gone by, 33 years, you know, to be exact, if they wanted to set it, you know, in present day as of right now, that, you know, a generation has gone by that they want to get this camp up and running again, right? Well, ironically, the one that's spearheading it is the same woman who was there back in 1985. She was a 19-year-old counselor then, right? But now she's like 49 or 50 years old, but she's always had a love for that camp. She was a child at that camp for years, and then she became a camp counselor there for like 4 or 5 years before that horrible night. And over the decades, she's always hoped that she could bring it back to life, that she could actually, you know, get it up and running again. That for her would be very therapeutic. So she sort of steps into this kind of Steve Christie role from the original 1980 film. Now, I don't mean that it's written that way to go, you know, her character is going to experience the same things. I just mean that she's taking over the sort of, you know, older figure in relation to the new camp counselors that are coming in. But we begin to learn the story of what happened back then because we didn't really know anything in the first 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, deliberately, because we're trying to set this up in a very sort of suspenseful way. But the new camp counselors realize who she is, and they begin to sort of poke around. They begin to ask questions because they want to know, because, you know, they're a little weary, you know, they're really excited, but, oh my God, this is like known as Camp Blood, right? So they kind of want to, you know the story. And she's a little, you know, emotionally disconnected at first, but she begins to come around because she feels, you know what, this will be good for them. And of course, it's therapeutic for me to continue to talk about it and work through it. And we can get this camp back up and running and in the shape that it was long before the massacre ever occurred. However, little do they know is that shit is about to go down again because, well, Pamela Voorhees, you know, is onto them and onto the idea that, you know, the camp is going to be back up and running. And of course, she's not going to have any of that fucking shit, right? So I think if you build that kind of foundation, build that anticipation for Jason Voorhees' return, which can be alluded to and nodded at all throughout this movie. Like there's this, you know, something along the lines of like legend has it that Jason was watching his mother's murder spree that night from the lake. So there's this, you know, there's this undertone all throughout the movie, even though Pamela Voorhees is the killer. Of course, we don't know that till the last like 15, 20 minutes of the movie. But there's like this undertone that Jason is coming back. Like there's this kind of like Jason's out there, you know, he's watching, waiting for the moment to come back. And of course, we all know what that moment and reason is, right? But I would love to see something like that. Are they going to do it? No, probably not, because this is what people identify Friday the 13th with. And I totally understand it. I get it. But for me, I would love to see something like that. I think it would be totally awesome. Now, could you do everything that I said and still have Jason as the killer? Yeah, of course. Absolutely. 100%. But I always really loved the angle that it was not only Jason's mom, but it was a woman killer. Nobody saw that coming in 1980. Nobody saw that coming in 1980. It wasn't popular then, and it's not all that popular now, right? I mean, 38 years later, it's really not that popular now to have a, you know, female antagonist in a horror movie killing and murdering people. Yes, we have had it more so since then, but it's not nearly as popular as it is their male counterparts, right? So I would love to play that angle, but build that anticipation for Jason's return. Make it moody and atmospheric and fucking off the chain in terms of blood and guts and kills, and it's fucking Friday the 13th, man. Bring it into the 21st century. That's what I would love to see. And then if you do that, you give yourself the best probability of success, and if it is successful, now it's like, fuck yes, you know, let's bring Jason. Now we're going to bring Jason into the mix, right? And we see him get his mask again, right? Not in the same ways, okay? But we see him get his mask. How does he get his mask? In the remake, it was kind of like, it just kind of seemed like Jason was all of a sudden there. You know what I mean? And it's like, I want that anticipation. I want that buildup. I want that suspense, man. That's what I want. Now, one last thing I want to touch on before I let you guys go is, of course, the music. Now, Friday the 13th is not like Halloween. Halloween is known for its iconic music, and not just the Halloween theme, but of course, all the other music that's in the movie as well. Laurie's theme, The Shape Stocks, Better Check the Kids. I mean, just look at the Halloween soundtrack, and it's full of iconic music that is so identified with that movie. And leading the way, of course, is the iconic Halloween theme. With Friday the 13th, leading the way is the iconic kill, 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 ma, 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 or some of you may know it as ch, 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 ha, ha. And in no other Friday the 13th movie, I mean, maybe in 2 and maybe in 3 as well, the first couple for sure, but nowhere else is it creepier and eerier for me than it is in that first Friday the 13th movie. I mean, at the very beginning of that movie, that POV shot with Pamela Voorhees walking through the cabin with all of the children sleeping, and that's where you hear it for the first time, I believe, it's so eerie and it's so creepy. You know, by the time you get to Friday the 13th Part 6 and Part 7 and Part 8, and I mean, you hear it, but it doesn't stand out for me in the same ways that it stood out in the original Friday the 13th and maybe even the first couple of films. I want to get back to that. I want that kill, 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 ma, 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 to be just, it puts goosebumps up and down the back of my neck. Now, of course, when it comes to the music, the original Friday the 13th and the first couple, it's very identifiable. When you hear the music from the first couple of Friday the 13th films, you instantly know it's from Friday the 13th. I want to get back to that. Now, of course, bring it into the 21st century, modernize it, tweak it a bit, you know, so it doesn't sound, you know, so 1980s or a little campy or a little laughable. Not that it does. I'm just saying for some people, it might be like, this is kind of sounds a little too old school, but bring it into the 21st century. Very much like what sort of Insidious did with its music. Insidious has a lot of music beats and a lot of music moments that are very old school classic horror, especially the opening credits of Insidious. And when you see the Insidious title, you know, I mean, that is very old school horror brought into the 21st century. I want them to do that with Friday the 13th. Bring that iconic Friday the 13th music, but modernize it so it doesn't sound maybe campy or hokey to today's audiences. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. McRae is MCRAE. Facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. That's where I tend to post in the meantime and in between time when I'm not uploading videos. Yeah, and hopefully you'll join me there. Comment below and let me know! I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.